Hey gang, welcome to the SitRep for 12th February 2022. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time, daylight savings time, I think. I can't really keep track of that shit. Okay, so this SitRep, well firstly, what's a SitRep? I'm glad you asked. A SitRep, or a situation report, is basically a snapshot of what's going on. So what I'm going to endeavour to do with these, I'll try and put one up every day or so, or maybe once a week, depending on how much I can be fucked doing it. And it's going to be all the things that I find interesting that I'm seeing in the news. So all the information that I'm looking at, the things that kind of lead into my planning cycle, the things I'm interested in or are concerning me. And so once I look at all these things, then I can kind of look at where I'm heading and where I'm planning and what preps I'm doing and tailor towards that. So to help you out and to help you sort of get into that mindset, and maybe to assist you in not having to look at all this crap, because I do sit there and read a lot of news reports and pour through a lot of information and look up journal articles and things like that that are referenced in there. To save you doing that, I'm just going to do it because it can be quite anxiety provoking looking at all these bad things that are going to happen in the world. Yeah, so hopefully I'll get one of these up every few days or so. We'll see how it goes. All right, so what I'm going to start off with is, I'll start off overseas. I'll start with the Ukraine. That's a pretty big thing at the moment that's going on. So usually in mainstream media, what they start with is something that is totally useless but is happening in your backyard. And then they give about 10 seconds to some, massive life-altering event, but it happened in Iraq or Africa, so most Australians don't care. I'm going to start the other way, though. So in Ukraine, some of the interesting information that's came in this morning that I've been looking at, US has bolstered 3,000 troops into Poland as of this morning. So they're slowly shifting their forces in towards Ukraine now. And I think they've moved, I think it was 16 fighter jets over from Germany. So you can see that they're starting to amass there. A lot of talk coming out this morning from the US too. Bloomberg actually released today that they have heard that the US government sources that they have had said 15th of February is the date that Russia is actually going to invade Ukraine. I find that pretty implausible. That not only would Russia let that be known, but that US would then find out that information and then they would let that be known. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt too. That's Bloomberg, so their track record is a bit whatever. But what you can look at from this is that US is really starting to ramp up this rhetoric about there is going to be a war. It's going to happen soon. They're saying next week is when the invasion is going to happen. So possibly something will happen that's going to trigger this thing to kick off in the next week or so. So just keep your eye on that. There is some reports, and these are unconfirmed too. So where possible, I'll try and tell you what is my opinion on things, what I cannot confirm, and then other things that are from, or I'll try and give you the source of where they're actually from. So unconfirmed reports of fighting in occupied Ukraine at the moment. So some of Ukraine, if you don't know, is actually occupied by pro-Russian forces. And apparently there's been shelling and small arms fighting. So that's people with guns fighting each other. And the other big thing that's coming out of there is the cyber attack threat. So this is probably the biggest information that I think is pertinent to Australians as we're sitting at the moment. If Russia invades Ukraine, there's a whole heap of other things that might come out of that, but the most immediate threat that we're looking at the moment is cyber attack, and that can be very widespread because obviously that's not limited by geolocation. That can be spread around the world very quickly. We know Russia has the capability and the will, and has done it in the past, and they also have the ability to sever internet connectivity from different places. So we could see cyber attacks happening. Some pretty easy sort of stuff that they do, things like denial of service or brute force attacks. They've been known to use, and even severing cables, undersea cables. So start to think about that. What would you do if the internet dropped out tomorrow? How would you do anything? that's something to start thinking about. And if you access everything through the internet, including your financials, then maybe that's another consideration that you want to start thinking of. So, like I said, this information is not that useful in of itself unless we can actually use it to predict what might be happening and protect ourselves in the future. Okay, so the US, the EU, the UK, Israel, and Norway so far have all either started pulling their people out of the Ukraine. So the US is totally pulling all their diplomats out. Norway's shifting them westward, and UK has issued a warning for people to not travel there, and they're starting to wind down things there. So all these countries are starting to pull out their diplomats, which is another big sign that things are getting pretty serious, pretty heated. Ukraine itself has just increased its territory service, so its defense service, which is essentially like reserves, I guess. That's it, getting civilians in and teaching them how to fight. They've increased that by 2 million people, so that's pretty substantial. Think about that right now. If 2 million civilians just got dragged into the army in Australia, that hasn't been seen since kind of Vietnam, and we're forcing people to do it then. So that's something to think about. On the Russian side too, Putin just got the EU and the NATO response to what his demands were, and he basically binned it. He was, "Niet, comrade, this is shit. I would not even wipe my ass with this." That's a terrible Russian accent, I apologize. But he said, "This is crap. This is not good enough." So obviously there was a bit of hope that we're going to get some diplomatic movement there. And this morning it's just kind of ground to a halt with that information that's come out. Other stuff that's happening around the world that might be of interest as well. In the Middle East, Israel seems to be fairly aggressive at the moment. There's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. Not a lot of it seems to be hitting the news, so you've got to dig it up a bit. Israel just put down a riot from Palestinians, and they did it in the Israel way, which is with extreme violence. So there's a lot of friction there between the Palestinians and the Israelis again. And then we've also got the issues that are going on in the UAE. So UAE's been attacked in the last a couple of times in the last 2 weeks. So things are stepping up in the Middle East as well. And the reason I'm throwing that in there is because we're pretty focused on Ukraine at the moment, Russia, NATO sort of things. But there's a whole heap of other things we need to think about. So there's this Middle East conflict that's actually kicking up. We've got North Korea, who is firing off rockets at the moment. They've done more rocket testing in the past 2 weeks than they have in the previous 2 years. And we've got China always eyeballing Taiwan, and all these things could work like a domino effect. So if Russia does go into Ukraine, it's going to distract a whole heap of people and resources, and then all these other things could start tumbling, and we could quite quickly find ourselves in, I don't want to say World War III, but World War III. This is all having a pretty big effect on the stock market too. So stock markets most of the main indices are down 1.5%-ish. This is all general information as well. I'm not going to go into every single stock market, what's going on. Some things go up, some things go down, but generally when you're looking at a snapshot of it, stocks are going down, crypto's going down by 3 or 4% across the board. But that's what crypto does, and it seems to be doing that a lot lately. Inflation figures are out. Inflation's up 7.5%, which is a 40-year high. And gold and silver are actually doing what gold and silver should do in this kind of environment, and they are going up. So gold just went up over $2,600, $2,600 Oz before it closed for the weekend, which is quite high. That's one of the higher points that it's ever been at. All right. Domestically, what we're seeing, so I'll start off with a bit of weather sort of stuff. Those floods that have happened through central Australia, which have kind of severed WA from the rest of the world. I mean, severed them more than their own government is severing them, has caused a whole heap of issues. So they're having extreme supply chain problems over there. So my contact on the ground over there, this is some HUMINT, so that's military speak for human intelligence, and that just means when you actually talk to another human being and don't just look up something on Facebook. And by HUMINT, I mean my brother. I was talking to my brother this morning. They're getting reports that they will get their supplies come in on the 25th of this month. So it's the 12th now. That's 13 days to get 2 weeks before stuff starts coming in and the shelves start filling up again. Apparently fresh food isn't too much of an issue over there, but the other stuff, you know, things that they usually import from the other side of the country is taking a little while to get there because they can't get those road trains through consistently, and there's a bit of a backlog at the moment. Stuff coming the other way as well, bigger things certainly are getting stopped. So someone I know who just moved to Canberra from WA, it's going to take them a month to get their vehicle over. So some disruptions that are happening from east to west across our country at the moment. Having said that, hey Commie Killer, thanks for joining. Having said that, I did just do an order from Survival Supplies Australia, which I'm pretty sure operate out of Perth. And that got here within 3 days. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. But maybe my survival supplies are more important than people eating in WA at the moment. But those floods are easing. So weather report at the moment, it's pretty fine across the country. It doesn't look like there's going to be any major flooding in the next couple of days at least. So fingers crossed that that sort of eases a little bit for those guys. Last thing we'll talk about domestically, obviously we've got a lot of the freedom convoys that are going on at the moment. So for those of you who have been living under a rock, this all started in Canada, where the truckers got shut down from moving across the border, so they decided to set up their own little, I don't want to say blockade, that's what the rhetoric is that's coming out, their own little protest, and by little I mean huge protest, that's going on, and that's now spread across the world. So Australia has got involved. We've got the convoy to Canberra. New Zealand apparently is having one down to Wellington as well. I have read reports that up to 27 countries throughout the EU region, that's Europe, also having these sort of convoys happen as well. So big ground movement from the people there. Bit sick of mandates. No shit. No one likes being locked down, and I think people have had enough. And I've said this for years, that people don't realize this. Like, these countries, our countries, Australia is very prone to this. Runs off truckers. So if you're gonna fuck with anyone, it should not be truckers. do not mess with truckers. So Austria apparently banned, not sure, they don't want it to happen. Austria, for those who don't know, Austria is, Australia's getting a lot of flack across the world for being kind of pretty totalitarian and lockdown heavy at the moment, but Austria is taking it to the next level. So maybe it's something to do with the ASUT link. Sends people crazy. Yeah. So a lot of rhetoric coming out of the governments too, that they're talking about these things being terrorist activities, blockades. A great one I heard out of Canada this morning was they said they're impeding, it's illegal because they're impeding people's freedom of movement. And I was like, isn't that what you've been doing for the last 2 years? But yeah, huge gatherings. I just talked to someone, well, I didn't just talk to someone, but I got a text message from someone on the ground on the Canberra one at the moment. And if anyone's here in the chat and you're there at Canberra, let us know how it's going. I've had reports from anywhere from about 15 to 20,000 people, anywhere up to 500,000 people who are marching. I've seen some of the photos and the footage that's coming out. It does look like there's a lot of people marching there at the moment. If you are out there, guys, do stay safe. These things are rife for things going a bit pear-shaped and a bit sideways, especially, it's a prime environment for other actors to get involved and skew it off for reasons that they want. So I'm really hoping that the power of protest actually works. I'm a big fan of free speech, so I really like people getting out there and having their view put out there. I'm not going to comment too much on anything more than that. You can probably figure out where I probably sit with all this, but I do hope that it remains peaceful and that the word gets put out there without there having to be any violence or anything like that from either side too. Like, there are people out there doing a job, there are people out there having their say, and I want all those people to be safe out there. So if you are out there today, stay safe, stay happy, stay loud. But that pretty much wraps it up for today. So for those who didn't get it at the start, I will put this up on my in my post, so you can go back and watch this. But this is just a SitRep for today, for 12th of February 2022. I'm going to try and hopefully put these up every few days or so. So I sit there and look at the news a lot and kind of synthesize the information that I'm looking at, and then use that to try and figure out where maybe the world is heading and where maybe I want to start prepping, and if something's about to spike. So quite often, if you're looking at these sort of things, you can figure out things like, oh, there might be a price spike, i.e. the last 2 weekends, when information has been put out there that people were going to be driving en masse down to Canberra, and I live in and around Canberra, the price of fuel went up about 7 cents a litre. So, these are the sort of things that can help us out in the future and help us plan for things and be safer, be more prepared, be safer. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to chuck it up there. But apart from that, I will pretty much wrap up now and leave you guys with that. I'll endeavor to try and get this up on my YouTube channel as well. So if you are watching this, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, feel free to chuck a like on it, share it with whoever you want. And yeah, if there's nothing else, guys, stay safe and Semper Paratus. See ya.